Welcome back to the deep dive. So you handed us a single source this time, but wow, it reads less like an article and more like a political detonation.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's this lengthy, really charged commentary on a recent railway tragedy in Mexico, the derailment of the Transismico, and the political firestorm that just exploded right after.
And what was fascinating here is exactly that, the immediacy.
Mm.
Our source doesn't even pretend to be neutral.
Not at all.
It treats this tragic event, a descarrilamiento, a derailment that the source claims cost about 20 lives, not as, an engineering failure, but as a potential political weapon from the get-go.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to distill the core, powerful claims of this narrative. It's not enough just to know what happened. We have to understand the political ecosystem this source is operating in.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Mhm.
The core tension the source sets up immediately is that the political opposition, which they call the right, or pre-IN, are allegedly celebrating and benefiting from this catastrophe.
It's basically a preemptive declaration of war. The source is looking at the opposition's response, not as, legitimate criticism or even mourning,
Right.
but as a coordinated, cynical political move. They're asserting that the accident is either direct sabotage or, at the very, very least, an event being ruthlessly exploited to damage the current administration.
So if the political stakes are that high, we have to start with the economic stakes. Let's talk about the infrastructure at the heart of all this.
Yeah.
The Interoceanic train, the Tren Transismico. Why does the source treat this one rail line like a national treasure?
Because, historically and strategically, you could argue it is. The source goes to great lengths to establish just how important this project is. They characterize it as a work that dates back, at least in concept, to the 19th century.
100 years.
Yeah, this train is meant to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. It's a historic dream that, previous governments either couldn't pull off or just abandoned.
So it's not just an investment. It's framed as, like, a matter of national destiny.
And regional balance. The source calls it a relevantissimo work, a fundamental economic lever, specifically for the southeast of Mexico, a region that's historically lagged behind.
Okay, so what's the strategic importance?
Oh, it's simple and it's huge. Global trade. The source claims that the train's operational costs for moving cargo are very competitive with the Panama Canal.
Really? That competitive?
That's the claim. So in the source's eyes, this project isn't just local stimulus. It's the most important investment detonator in recent history, designed to grab a huge chunk of global commerce.
That magnitude really explains why the political fallout is so explosive when the accident happens. Now, about the event itself, the source is very suspicious in its description.
Extremely. It calls it a tragic accident and then immediately follows with, or perhaps worse.
Right. They're already looking for culprits.
Immediately. They mention the descarrilamiento, the derailment, and then they drop this really specific, interesting detail.
What's that?
That a private Spanish company was involved in building the exact segment where the accident happened.
Huh. Now, why would they include that detail? What's the angle there?
I think it's a preemptive shield. By noting a private international firm was involved, the source is already countering the attack they expect from the opposition.
Which would be to claim it was all due to government corruption or mismanagement.
Exactly. The source is saying, hold on, don't just assume this is AMLO's fault. The private sector was here too. But they also add that, regardless, the investigation will proceed.
That little detail just shows how high the suspicion is from the start. They aren't waiting for facts. They're already playing out the political narratives.
And they're warning the opposition right then and there not to cry political persecution later on, when the government starts investigating what they clearly believe could be sabotage.
So they're drawing a line in the sand.
A very clear one. The thinking is, because the opposition benefits so much from a failure like this, a failure that damages a flagship government project, they're the prime suspects. And any complaints of persecution are just political theater.
Okay, so that gives us the economic and the immediate context. Let's pivot now to what the source calls the full-scale, coordinated offensive against the president and his projects. This isn't just criticism. It's presented as a strategy.
A deeply cynical one, according to this commentary. The ultimate goal isn't just to criticize the train. It's to attack the president's fortaleza, his strength, his credibility.
To make the public lose faith in honest governance altogether.
Yes. And the message they're allegedly trying to send is, todos son iguales. Everyone is the same.
And that's the core attack, isn't it?
It is. It's the ultimate undermining strategy. You have an administration that came to power promising to fight corruption and be different. So if the opposition can convince the public that, nope, they're just as corrupt, just as inept,
Then the whole project collapses.
the whole thing. The source argues they want to destroy the belief that honest governance is even possible.
And the source seems to find the coordination of these attacks almost comically transparent. They list out all these prominent figures.
A whole roster.
Alejandro Cardenas, Moreda, Anyorabi, journalists like López Dóriga and Javier Latorre, Margarita Zavala, the businessman Salinas Pliego.
And the claim is they're all saying the exact same thing. The source calls the whole effort Birdos crude.
And it's not just about the derailment. The commentary explicitly accuses the right, the Parian coalition, of constantly sabotaging other major public works.
Right, they bring up the Tren Maya and the Felipe Angeles Airport, AIFA.
Let's pause on AIFA because it's mentioned as a target for continuous alleged sabotage. For anyone listening, can you just quickly explain why the rivalry between the new AIFA and the old airport, AICM, is so central here?
Sure, so the current administration built AIFA as a major public work, built it fast and efficiently. The source argues the opposition keeps all the travel, the media, the regulatory focus on the old, saturated AICM.
So they starve the new airport of traffic.
They try to. And if the new project can't get off the ground, it validates the opposition's claim that it's malacia, poorly made, and irrelevant. It's sabotage through inertia, really.
A political move disguised as a logistical preference. And the attacks, they get even more personal, don't they? They go beyond the infrastructure. The source details these ferocious intrigues targeting the president's family.
Yes, specifically his sons, Jose Ramon and Gonzalo. The source spends a lot of time refuting corruption claims against Gonzalo's involvement with the project.
And what's the defense?
That Gonzalo had an unpaid honorary role. He received zero financial benefit. The source calls the claims false, absolutely false, and frames them as pure character assassination.
And this is where the source really tries to build its case for this being a pre-planned offensive, not just a reaction.
This is an extraordinary claim.
They mention the media allegation that the journalist López Dóriga published conversations about a potential derailment before it even happened.
Which, if true, completely changes the story. The source uses that to argue this wasn't just opportunism after a tragedy. It was a planned, known offensive.
So if opposition circles were talking about the line's vulnerability before the derailment,
the source sees that as evidence of a conspiracy. It's the capstone on their argument about the high stakes and the opposition's willingness to engage in, well, anything.
in the world of this commentary, the opposition isn't just a rival, it's an existential threat.
Exactly.
Okay, let's turn to the third segment now. The historical counterpoint. The source uses the entire history of Mexican railways to defend the current administration. Why does this political fight need to dig back through a century of rail history?
Because it's crucial for the moral argument. The source is arguing that what's happening now, this building spree, is an act of historical redemption.
And they're contrasting it directly with what they call the destruction of the public passenger rail system by previous administration.
Specifically, they point fingers at governments like Ernesto Cedillo's. They claim he privatized and essentially gave away the country's public passenger railways.
And this was infrastructure that had been public for decades, right, since Porfirio Diaz.
Yes, and it was handed over to private companies like Kansas City Rail.
The source doesn't just frame this as, like, a bad economic decision. They frame it as a humanitarian disaster.
A profound one. The social cost, according to the source, was just immense. They argue that eliminating passenger train service, which was the economic lifeblood for countless towns along the routes, condemned millions to the hunger, migration, impoverishment, and death.
Oh, that is a powerful statement.
It is. They paint those privatized trains as invaluable, only serving cargo, and in doing so, killing the local economies that depended on them. They call this privatization an atraco a la nación, a heist against the nation.
An act of Mayor Descaro, extreme shamelessness.
And that history is the entire foundation for why they defend the current administration so fiercely. It sets up this fundamental difference. Previous administrations prioritized corporate profit over people.
And tore down national assets.
Right. Whereas the current administration is led by someone who loved the people, investing in projects like the Transísmico that are meant to benefit communities and bring back passenger service.
And the source uses numbers to back this up, this humanist policy. They cite some pretty impressive statistics.
They do. 13 million people lifted out of poverty, a 13% increase in the middle class under the current government. They argue that this economic success is what's really fueling the opposition's rage.
It connects back to that todos son iguales strategy.
It does. If the current policies are actually working, if they're reducing poverty, the opposition can't just attack the economy. So they have to shift the battle to corruption and sabotage claims to destroy credibility, even if it means cheering for a train wreck.
And to really hammer the contrast home, the source brings up the failed projects of past administrations. They say Fox had, well, no major public works of note.
Right. And they mentioned Calderon's costly failed refinery and that famously criticized bicentennial monument.
The Sawabi Crema.
That's the one. And then there's Peña Nieto, who they claim never finished the Toluca train and canceled the Querétaro train, which ended up costing a fortune in indemnities.
And all those past failures are framed as acts of self-enrichment of wasted public money.
A stark, negative contrast to the current efforts. It's clear the source sees this as a battle between a government trying to clean up decades of plunder and the plunderers trying to fight their way back into power.
It's a narrative of good versus evil, fought with train tracks and airport terminals.
Absolutely.
So, as we wrap up this really intense deep dive, it's clear that a national tragedy was instantly absorbed into a much larger political and historical war. A conflict centered on huge infrastructure projects, the legacy of privatization, and the personal credibility of the country's leadership.
Yeah, the source leaves us with a final, pretty extraordinary warning. It really reflects the extreme stakes they've been describing.
What's the final word?
They assert that the impressive hatred, the odio against the president, is deep-seated, and they link the right in its ties to violent ultra-right groups and even organized crime. The source concludes definitively that the investigation will be thorough and it will get to the bottom of what happened.
That is an aggressive, high-stakes conclusion to a deeply partisan source. So what does this all mean for you? Given the source's detailed historical analysis, the claim that past privatizations devastated local economies by ending passenger service, consider this. If the Transísmico truly succeeds in reigniting those regional economies and connecting people again, does that economic success become a kind of bulletproof shield against political sabotage? Or does it just raise the stakes for future attacks? How might that kind of verifiable economic uplift fundamentally alter the future balance of political power in Mexico?
It's a question worth mulling over, especially when the line between an engineering failure and a political conspiracy is drawn so very, very thin.
Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll be waiting for your next stack of sources.